The human spirit is unconquerable. We are individuals and we are sovereign, born with unlimited potential, gifted from our Creator. Our mission is to break free from the systems that bind us.
I volunteer as tribute.
We strive for peace and prosperity and overcome all challenges, roadblocks, and obstacles. We are empowered because we think for ourselves and we act for ourselves. We are self-reliant and independent, but guided by the wisdom of those who share our values.
What possible difference can I make?
There is no government, no ruler, nor ideas that are able to stop us. We are driven to succeed because we seek political freedom, financial freedom, and spiritual freedom.
It's all for nothing if you don't have freedom.
This is Mike Corbell, and you are listening to the Invictus Mind. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming back to the Invictus Mind podcast. This is your host, Mike Corbell. I'm grateful to be here and grateful for everyone checking us out. If you are here for the first time, this is the podcast where we have discourse on how to communicate freely and voluntarily in search of political freedom. We discuss opportunities in our personal economies in search of financial freedom. And we explore our gifts, talents, belief systems, and faith-promoting activities in search of spiritual freedom. We discuss how to magnify our callings and become unconquerable. Just want to leave a reminder that you can find the Invictus Mind podcast in any of your favorite podcatchers. The videos are up on YouTube and Patreon. And if you like this show, please go ahead and subscribe and leave us a review on Apple. I would greatly appreciate that. We also have a newsletter that way more people need to get, where we will update all of the show notes. We will provide great information on our affiliates and other business opportunities. If you're looking to get out of that JOB and wish to start something of your own, just text the word Invictus, INVICTUS, to 33777, and I'll be sure to send you some great stuff. All right, today in the program, I'm having a discussion with a person I believe is making a difference in his community. I discovered him while I was listening to another great podcast. I thought his demeanor and attitude were perfect for this show, so I reached out to him to come chat with me. My guest today is a firefighter by trade, so it's fitting when he says he likes to run counter to the direction most people run in. He makes his home in Texas. He also shares an interest with me as a musician. He is a drummer for a band. I was a bass player, for those who have not heard, but he's also a podcaster. His show recently had a name change. It was formerly called the Death to Tyrants podcast, but now it can be found under the name Counterflow, where he features interviews with thinkers who hold views outside the narrow framework of fashionable opinion. He likes to challenge conventional left versus right binary paradigm of political thought and focus more on the real distinction of what it means to be free or unfree. I'd like to welcome to the show, Buck Johnson. How you doing, Buck?
Good, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, before we started recording, I just saw a meme that said, though much of the power grid is shut off in Texas, the media is reporting that Senator Ted Cruz is on vacation in Cancun, Mexico. But it also said that, fortunately, Texas state requires a mandate for one course in government to graduate high school. So most Texans also know that U.S. senators don't have the power to control the power grids there.
Yes, that's not only was, I haven't investigated when he flew to Mexico. It certainly, I'm assuming, was not in the last few days because flights were canceled. So I'm assuming it was before this went down. But yeah, I thought even if it wasn't, he's a U.S. senator. So because he lives here, I'm not sure what he's going to do with the power grids.
Well, luckily you have power today, so that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I as of yesterday at 5:30ish, no more rolling blackouts. So it's all good. And it's funny, I had an interview yesterday with a guy, and our blackouts were happening every 2 hours. And so I was like, I wrote him, hey man, can I bump, because the interview was going to fall within the blackout hour, and I had to readjust everything. I had no idea when I booked it that my complete loss of power would be happening every 2 hours at my house. So yeah, it's been weird, but I'm very fortunate really that everything's back on. Water works for the most part. I'm clean. It's nice.
Well, here in Chicago, it's dumped like probably 2 feet of collective snow on us over the last month. It's probably snowed, Buck, nonstop for like the whole month of February so far. It's just ridiculous.
So you guys are up there like, what's wrong with Texas? They're freaking out. It just snowed a few days.
Exactly.
We're not used to it. It's
Well, yeah.
beautiful though. It
Oh,
is
is it?
nice. Oh yeah, it's gorgeous. Just it's a winter wonderland in my big ass yard, which is you don't usually see that. It's cool.
Nice, nice. But you're originally from California, aren't you?
I was born in Texas, uh, grew up a little bit here, and then moved to California for a few years when I was young, and then back to Texas.
Okay, very cool. I've been to Texas one time. I spent a weekend in Dallas, Fort Worth area. It was nice. So not snowy, but it was very hot.
Yeah, it's rough in the summer. I'll be honest. August is a rough time. But having been through this last week, I'll take August in Texas over trying not to bust my ass walking on a driveway, just to go to my truck. I'm walking like I'm on an ice skating rink.
Nice, nice. Well, Buck, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me a little bit today. I've seen you on Facebook for a while. I never really made contact with you. I just kind of saw your name floating around there. And it wasn't until you were on the Lions of Liberty podcast that I actually discovered who you were. And then, of course, I checked out your podcast.
Oh, cool. Yeah, a lot of people jumped on board after the appearance on Lions of Liberty.
Well, there's about 100,000 libertarian podcasters out there.
No kidding.
And, when I heard Death to Tyrants, I said, okay, it's probably just another run-of-the-mill podcast. And the first thought that came to my head was the word Sic Semper Tyrannis. So I don't know if that's where you came up with your name or not.
Partially. Yeah, I mean, I got it from that. And it also happened to be in a song that I liked a lot. And then I'm covered with tattoos. You can't see it right now because it's cold here. So I have a hoodie on. But yeah, and I have Death to Tyrants tattooed across my chest too, from an old school sailor tattoo style piece that I got. So nice. It was part of my life in so many ways. I love Southern history, and obviously that's what John Wilkes Booth said before he shot Lincoln, and so it kind of spurred from that, and then I ended up changing it after all of that.
Well, you got the Death to Tyrants banner hanging in the back there. So
yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. Still got a cool banner for it. So I'm keeping that.
Awesome. Cool. So, Buck, you're not a magician, a musician.
Yes. I play magical music. Maybe I'm both. I'm a drummer. As my bandmates in the past have said, you're not a musician. You're the drummer. That's a good joke for you guys that actually play, scales and whatnot.
Well, I was a bass player, so I was always neck and neck with the drummer. So
yes,
most guitar players are in their own world, and the bass and the drums kind of just fade away into the back. But I think that we drive the music more than anything else.
We do, and we don't get the glory. We're the unsung heroes.
Awesome. So, are you currently touring or anything like that, playing in a band, or you just kind of put it on hiatus? How's that going?
The latter. Yes, I put it on hiatus. Maybe by necessity at some point in 2020, as everyone knows, 2020 was kind of strange for musicians trying to play gigs. And also I moved out of the city that I was living in, and I'm in a small town now here in Texas. And so I kind of got soured on, there were so many musicians that I knew that were pro lockdown, and they didn't want to have gigs, and they'd rather sit down, watch Netflix for a year or something like that and collect unemployment. That's not all of them. I knew some that it was a very hard time for, but I kind of got soured on the musical world, and Austin in general, the city I was in, is just, I got very black pilled on Austin. So moving away from that and out of that mess kind of got me. I've been so focused on the podcast lately that the music stuff's not a big deal to me. I hope my friends that I'm still close with in the music scene are able to start playing gigs at some point, but I don't have as much interest in it for right now, we'll say.
Gotcha. That was one thing I missed. I was in a band years ago, and I would love to get back into playing music again, but I can't imagine why people would just love the lockdowns and just be at home. I would want to be out on stage and in front of people all the time. So
yeah, it was a little surprising, some of the people, not so surprising with others, but certainly disappointing, I would say.
But most musicians I come across are either very libertarian or very liberal, and so
Oof. Yeah, that's for sure. That's an extreme minority are very libertarian, and a giant majority, at least in Austin, are pretty far left. And the interesting thing is, without a real understanding of politics, it's just kind of the default mode in the brain. I think I'm a leftist, and here's what I should like. It's kind of that. Not a lot of research done. The ones that do a lot of research do tend to be a little bit more libertarian, I suppose.
I'm thinking of the punk rock and anarchy, but you don't really get that too much anymore. Now, instead of being against the rules, all the punk rockers are like, obey the rules.
Yes, it's terrible. It's terrible. Yeah, the punk rock that I remember this past few months, Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols was photographed with a MAGA hat on. And so many left-wing punkers that I know were so upset. Oh my God, he supports the Nazi, blah, blah. And it's like, he's just doing it to piss people off because that's what punk rockers used to do. And now you guys are like simping for Joe Biden. What a change.
Crazy world we live in.
Yeah, it is. It's 2020 unveiled. It took the mask off everyone. That's for sure. as we're supposed to be wearing them, but it unmasked a lot of people. Just 2020, the Trump years, COVID, the lockdowns, it kind of unveiled people's true characters.
Yeah, for one thing, I'm glad for 2020 for one reason. I've always wanted to be into podcasting, and I finally learned how to actually put one together. And I spent most of last year just learning all the ins and outs of this trade.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I listened to probably more podcasts than I should admit to.
Mm-hmm.
But, I really liked yours. I've been listening to your Counterflow podcast for a while, and
Thank you.
Buck, since this is the first time I'm meeting you, I thought that maybe you just spend a minute, kind of tell your story and what your show is all about.
Well, which part of my story should I start with? You mean like the political journey part of it, or how I started the podcast, or which part?
So, am I guessing that you started a podcast before the political
No,
change, or no? Okay.
no. So, I mean, I'm basically, I would say libertarian. I don't. We might get into this. I don't love that term as a label, but I guess if there's people listening to this show between you and I, they will understand some more nuanced things than just the word libertarian. I would say maybe paleo libertarian, and so I've been that since late 90s or 2000 or so, basically a libertarian, blue-pilled libertarian for a while. It's kind of a reasoned Cato guy through my 20s and 30s. But so the show Counterflow, I took the brand of libertarian off of it from when I had Death to Tyrants. And I did that because, well, I jumped on board with Thaddeus Russell's Renegade Media Network, and he said, let's do a slight rebranding. You're too strident with Death to Tyrants and rah, rah, I'm this libertarian guy, ANCAP. And you're gonna limit your audience and put a ceiling on things. And he was very complimentary, saying, I think you're very good, and you shouldn't put a ceiling on yourself with a label like libertarian. And I think you could grow your audience a lot more. So, and at the same time, I had been kind of thinking that as well, because I had reached out to certain people. I had been turned down by guests because of the name Death to Tyrants. And then I had been turned down by some guests because of the term libertarian. And so that was frustrating me, because I thought libertarians have a certain, it just depends what audience you're discussing it with, but we have a certain stereotype out there. And it like I said, it depends on the audience. It can be, it changes depending on which crowd you're talking to. But I was like, I'm not what you think, and it would frustrate me. Well, maybe I should just get the name libertarian off of this. And then at the same time, like I said, Thad was approaching me to come on his network. So it was just appropriate timing for a name change. And that's the story of the Counterflow podcast.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, it seems like the last few conversations I've had was about this. I call it a futility of using labels in a political arena, because so many people get confused. And like you said, just one guy wearing a MAGA hat, whether or not you were a diehard Trumper or you just, voted for him, half the country just went bonkers because of one guy in political power. And so, like, I think that 2020 really unveiled a lot of these nuances that we need to focus on, and labels are kind of going by the wayside, in my opinion.
Yes. Yes. And I was getting attacked by some people online just in the last few days, and they're throwing libertarian as kind of they're throwing it at me and saying, well, it's libertarians guise their racism and intellectual wording and stuff like that. It was strange. It's not true. But even that, I was like, see, even this guy still calls me a libertarian. I hate this,
So, yeah, I remember when we first connected, you were asking me what I call myself, an
Yeah.
anarchist and a minarchist or what. And, it just really depends on who I'm talking to. I
Right.
kind of, I have my own thought process, right? I'm an individual, as most libertarians will say. I'm an individual, so don't put me in a box. I really hate that. So.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think when there's conversations within our bubble, like between you and me, using those words makes more sense sometimes, because if you said, well, I'm an ANCAP, I that helps me paint a picture a little bit. It makes more sense. If you tell your normie friend, I'm an anarchist or something, I'm an ANCAP, they take it quite differently usually.
They think that you're one of those people that separated themselves in Chad in Washington State or something like that, right?
Yeah, well, and a lot of people hear anarchist and they think exactly Chad, and they picture a guy in all black throwing a Molotov cocktail at Starbucks, not Murray Rothbard,
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, it's obvious to me, Buck, that from listening to a few of your shows that you definitely put a lot of thought into your program, and definitely are very intellectual, which I appreciate. And in the conversations I try to have with this podcast, it's not just your run-of-the-mill libertarian show where we're just going to complain about the government all day long. But I really want to challenge people's paradigms to think more intellectually going forward, because I think that's something that's missing in today's world.
Yes, that's for sure. It's Jeff Deist from the Mises Institute calls it. He says we're in post-persuasion America, and we are. I see people, libertarians, sometimes try to argue logic with like their normie friends, and that stuff, it just goes right over their head. It's an age of anti-intellectualism for sure that we're in right now.
Well, it's funny that you say that, though, because I've been in sales most of my career, and what I learned about sales is that most people don't actually make decisions using logic, but rather
Correct.
emotion.
Right.
So I think a large thing missing in the libertarian message is the emotional connection that people
Yes.
want to have towards their ideologies.
Yeah, that is the biggest thing missing in libertarianism, I would say. I think Ron Paul had some of that in his presidential runs in 08 and 12. You have to have a bit of the populism in your message that normal non-eggheads can relate to. And so sometimes that's emotional things, it's preaching, hey, this system is against you. Things like that, where you're getting that reaches people better than trying to explain academically why the minimum wage wouldn't work. We're missing that. We're missing a lot of the emotional connection with people. And people joke that we're autistic and everything, and there is maybe something to that. But that's one of the reasons we have that stereotype, is because it's so black and white a lot of times. Well, why would you be for the minimum wage? Do you not understand that that's going to disproportionately affect poor people? And here's what, we're so well read often that the moments a normie uses a term or a subject or a word that we've studied, it's like we can't wait to show you how much we know about this one subject without the emotional appeal.
Yeah, I think that we need to connect with the normies on their level first, and then kind of draw them back into what we're talking about. That'd be much more effective. That's why I love music so much, because I think it does touch that emotional part in our soul, And we just need more good libertarian musicians out there. That's something I'd be interested in hearing anyway.
Yeah, no doubt. It's oftentimes you're drawn to a song or a record, you hear the music first, and too often libertarians are out here trying to preach the lyrics before we show people the music. And so I think that's part of it too, because often then you get into a band or a song and oh man, listen, these words are really clever, but it's the hook of the song that caught you initially.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it right there, is the hook and listening to the music before the actual lyrics.
Yes.
So that's cool. Very cool. So Buck, I was really interested in when you told me you were a firefighter.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for is firefighters are always known as heroes out there, and driving around I see all these signs that say heroes live here, and they're hardly ever talking about firefighters. But I think of all the government positions out there, firefighters are probably the very most heroic of all of them.
Well, thanks. It's that heroes live here stuff. Thank goodness most firefighters I know wouldn't fall into the trap of putting that kind of messaging and signaling out there like that. Yeah, the nurses and teachers are doing that. It seems like that's who's doing it around here. It's crazy. The heroes live here thing. There's a hospital in Austin, and it's got a walkway between two sections that goes over a busy street. And that's what it says, giant in block letters across it. Heroes work here. Such a strange thing you shouldn't do a job so you can brag about that part of it being, that's just silly. So thanks for the compliment about firefighters. But yeah, luckily most of us that I know wouldn't signal such a strange thing like, hey, look at me, I'm a big hero and stuff like that. Because yeah, the signs are ubiquitous. They're all over the place. Teachers and nurses, that's who's doing it. I'm positive.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, not to put you on the spot with, being a hero, because that's just what I think of when I think of firefighters. But, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about how you got interested in that line of work.
Well, I was young, let's see, in my 18, 19, and my grandfather, every man on my mom's side of the family was a firefighter. And so it was always in the backdrop a little bit, but oddly enough, from what I can remember, I don't think I had ever been to a fire station in my childhood ever. So it wasn't where like my whole life, I'm going to be what grandpa was and that kind of thing. But it was always there and I knew of it. And I was a musician in my teen years in a band that played every Friday and Saturday night in San Antonio. And so at that age 17 and 18, I made enough money doing that to get by and live, basically, because I was playing music so often. And I told myself as I was doing that and living that part through the 17, 18 year of my life that I'm never going to get a job ever again that, in the past I'd worked at a grocery store, and I said, I'm never going to get a job that's not a career. So I'm either going to be playing music and scraping by like this, I'm 18, it's not that big of a deal, or I will have a career. And then I was just driving along one day and I was actually going to see my grandfather and I was like, he was a firefighter. That's a pretty cool thought. And it kind of went from there. I got into it and I started when I was 19 in one fire department and then moved to a different one when I was 21. And so been doing that my whole life.
Well, I'm sure it's a very satisfying career.
It's fun. Yeah. I've been doing it now for almost 23 years. I guess I could stop at some point. And so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, there's been a lot of fun moments. There's a lot of good people in the job. I will say that.
Cool. And you're not always running into fires or anything like that and acting like a hero. You said that, firefighters themselves don't want to brag about that kind of work, but it is the necessities of what you do. But, there's probably a lot of downtime and a lot of time to study and to learn about other things, right? Yes,
there is. It gives you time. A friend of mine, Donnie Gebert, that's been on my show a few times, was in the military for forever. And he said, basically, I read Rothbard, Mises, Hayek, Walter Block, while I was getting paid by the military. And he said he had so much downtime. And so I thought, that's funny. I've done a very similar thing, getting paid by the fire department. I went from in my 20s getting these audio tapes from the Cato Institute that taught you the history of libertarian thought, essentially. And then to, now I'm getting these books from Mises Institute. And I find myself quite often in the evenings at work, sitting in my bed, reading those. So yeah, it's interesting. A little twist of irony in there, I suppose, as well.
So what are your other co-firefighters? You call them co-firefighters, or your partners or whatever, right? Your co-workers. What do they think about some of the things that you're studying? You ever have conversations about that with them?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of them listen to my podcast. There's several people within the fire department that I work for that listen to the podcast. More than I thought. I get messages sometimes from them, and it's like, oh, wow, you listen to my show. That's cool. I wouldn't have thought that. But yeah, they tease me a little bit about it. We were playing this online game the other night, and where you put in these joke answers, and it kept being like, one said the hint was subtle brag, and the answer wrote, I have a podcast. And they tease me about it, but a lot of coworkers ask me stuff too, because they know that I do read a bunch of stuff on current events and lockdowns and now this power outage stuff that we're having, and so they'll come to me and say, hey, what's the latest news on this or that, or what are your thoughts on this? And I get a lot of that, and so yeah, some of them tease me, but I think some of them respect it as well. And then some of them just don't care about this kind of life, the libertarian stuff. So yeah, but it's a mix, but I think it's mostly positive from them.
It always fascinates me when I hear real diehard anarchists talk about how we want to privatize everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this conversation sometimes with, if the government only handled the fire department or only built the roads, they wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in theoretically, I would be an anarcho-capitalist, and I am for 100% privatization. But I often told people, look, if we're down to the point in society where the argument's over minarchy versus anarchy, I'm fine. That we're in a good spot. Yeah, if they do the roads and the fire department and EMS, I'm not going to be out there picketing by any means. Theoretically and philosophically, I think Rothbard was correct in his and Hoppe in privatizing everything. But yeah, it's not my hill to die on, so to speak. And having a government fire department does not hurt my feelings. In fact, it's made my whole life. So yeah, it could and would work. I've got a lot of theories on how you would privatize it and how it could work that way. But I think we're quite a ways off from that happening.
Yeah, we got to stop the wars and stop the drug war and everything like that, and all the bad things that government does that hurt people. I think those are the number one things we should focus on.
Yeah, let's work on the Federal Reserve and the military-industrial complex, and we'll conquer those first.
Awesome, very cool. So I want to talk a little bit about this ideology of you mentioned black pill, red pill, and all this other stuff before. And I really think that going forward in 2021, that there's a lot of reason for people to be black pilled or like have this sensation of all hope is lost. But I always try to look at the positive things that are happening. A lot of changes in technology, a lot of things are becoming decentralized. A lot more people obviously are podcasting, getting the message out. A friend of mine calls us the pamphleteers of this.
Yes. Yes. I've used that same term. Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of positive things going on, especially in the liberty movement, if you want to call it that. So what are some of your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'm pretty white pilled. And like you said, I try to end most of my episodes on an optimistic note. I'm an optimistic person in general because life is pretty dang good. Let's face it. And I did see a lot of black pilled friends, especially after the last election. And it's not like they were Trumpers by any means, but it's just when the left, it appears, are retaking over the seats of power where they pretty much already controlled everything. And now it's like I think it felt to a lot of us like Trump was kind of a dam, and just a little bit to where it slows down some of the flow essentially that's headed our way of leftist domination. So I could see the reason that people are like, oh God, here we go. And you start seeing people kicked off all these platforms and rumors, and then it happening of banks kicking people out because of their politics and stuff like that. And you start to think like, I'm not going to have a voice soon. My mortgage company's the bank's going to, rescind my mortgage and all of this stuff because of my politics. But I think that's getting too far down the rabbit hole of being black-pilled. And when you see things like that GameStop stock thing that happened, that how could that not be a white pill? And you start to realize that was an organic grassroots movement that just gave a giant kick in the balls to the cathedral. And they couldn't stop it. So, and again, like you said, that's technology. Technology allowed that to happen. And I made a recent comment on a show that it's like whack-a-mole, and that the cathedral is going to try to silence someone, or to get rid of this platform, or to shut out these people, but it's going to pop back up over here, and they can't keep doing the same thing. It's just there's too many of us that are red-pilled and have motivation and hate the state and hate the cathedral, that you can't silence us. It's just not going to happen.
I actually I work in a financial industry, and so I had a conversation with my manager about the GameStop situation, and I was very happy and delighted to hear him say that it was a win for the little guy, because that's always been our message, trying to help people become financially aware of not only their options, but get off the debt off their back, and to get out of the thumb of dependence on a federal system. And like you said, when GameStop happened, I never really got into personal trading or anything like that, and I missed that boat. Unfortunately, I would have loved to make a little bit of money, but I think the more that people are aware of stories like that, the more hope that they can get.
Yes, exactly. And the reaction to those type of events is often more important than the event itself. And I say that because when you see something like Elizabeth Warren, her reaction to it wasn't, she's Mrs. Populist, leftist, all this stuff for the little guy. And her reaction was she was upset at the effect it had on the rich people. So when normal folks see that reaction, each time it red pills people. And it happened with the election, all the Trump voters. Wait a second. So this system's kind of rigged against us. Okay, boom, giant red pill. So each time those events happen, the reaction to it is what's truly important. And I think that's the white pill, because there's going to be so many more people seeing the cathedral for what it truly is. And I think that's a good thing. How could that not be good?
Well, exactly. The system that we've been living under for so long has just done a good job putting blinders over all of our eyes. I mean, Mencius Mobley calls it the cathedral, and I think that's a fitting term.
Yeah,
it's just an organization that people have no idea how destructive it actually is to society, and yet they just go along with it, and they just play the game, and when they get hurt, they want to be angry, and they want to point fingers. But they don't realize that they actually have the power within themselves to go against the flow. Like, that's why I love the name of your show, Counterflow.
Counterflow. That's right.
So cool. So with your podcast, I've heard, like I said, I've heard a couple episodes. I heard one with Mark Claire. Of course, I heard the one with Thaddeus Russell. I love Thaddeus. I think his show is great.
Yes.
And, you had Matthew Erickson on your show, and you really get into some deep thought there.
Matt Erickson is something else. He's I love listening to him talk. He's he's the one that introduced me to Moldbug, and not so much introduced me in the fact, of course I knew who he was, and I had seen him on a few podcasts, heard him on a few podcasts, seen him on the videos. And of course, I've read Malice's book, The New Right, and he's talked about in there. But Matt Erickson really is like the one that just reached out and said, look, read this piece first, read this piece second, and then work from there. And I was hooked after Matt Erickson told me all that stuff. So I have him to thank for it.
Mm. So at least you have the desire to realize that there's more to life than what what we've seen with our own eyes. Like I said, going back to libertarianism, most people that I find within that movement are stuck in a certain paradigm, which they consider outside of the mainstream. But even within that own paradigm of libertarian thought, there are so many different diversions that you can take and so many different avenues you can go down. And that's why I think labels are just such a bad thing.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that you could say the same thing. You're so right on that, and it happens with music too. I was in such a niche of the type of music that I was listening to and playing that at some point I thought, maybe I've heard it all. Like, have I heard all of the kind of music that I like? And then it's like, wait a second, no. And then you discover this other route this way, and this other road leads you to this, and there's so much. And even though it's so much has all been made, you can't even find every tune that's been made through the years 1955 to 56. You still haven't heard all of those. And so, yeah, very much like libertarian thought and liberty-based circles of thought, we could say there's so much out there. It's just, you think you've read it all, you haven't. That's wonderful. There's always more to read, always more to learn. And if you're stagnant, just like in life, you can't be stagnant and happy with where you're at, because you're falling behind at that point. There's so much information out there. It's just a long, I don't like the term journey, is kind of cheesy, but it really is that. And so, yeah, that's part of the fun, discovering new things like that. And then sometimes discovering someone says is cool. You got to read this book, and maybe that's not for you. But it's just wonderful.
Yeah, that's why I listen to so many different podcasts out there, because just hearing people with different thoughts, you do a double take sometimes. You're like, what did he just say? And you got to listen to it again and hear from another perspective and everything like that. But so where are you trying to go with your podcast exactly? I mean, obviously Counterflow is obviously going against the mainstream paradigm of left and right thinking. But what was your intention when you actually really started that?
So I wanted to be able to get a little bit outside of the Liberty World bubble that I was in. And I think it's important to feature people from other walks of life that are red-pilled, because they exist. It's not just that the term red pill encapsulates how a certain wing of libertarians see the world, because there's communists, God, it's almost hurts me to say that. But there are far leftists that are red pilled on things. We might disagree on maybe the fix or the cure, if you will. But there's people in the music world that are red pilled, that have very unique and interesting outlooks on things. And so I just wanted to be able to, with Counterflow, talk to people that are not just in the ANCAP bubble, in the ANCAP space. And so that's kind of why I did the rebranding. And like, for instance, I interviewed yesterday Dr. Sean Baker, and that episode comes out on Monday, the 22nd. And he's the one that kind of made famous the carnivore diet.
Okay.
And he's got a lot to say that's very interesting. Just the fact that he's put the carnivore diet out there. Of course, he didn't invent it. Eating just meat's been around for thousands and thousands of years, but he's kind of promoted it heavily. He has been attacked heavily by mainstream outlets, we'll say, because he says you should just eat meat. And so that has all kinds of political ramifications that you might not think about at first. And then he's a giant, man. He's 6'5", like 240. And he's 10 years older than me and has won multiple powerlifting competitions, strongman competitions, rowing competitions. So the dude's a beast. And him and we started talking about these people that sit at home on their couch wearing a mask, preaching to all of us that we can't go outside and we shouldn't go work out and we shouldn't go to the gym. Just the irony that this lazy person that wants to sit home and watch Netflix for a year, praying that he doesn't get a disease that's essentially like the flu, and preaching to healthy people. So we discussed the irony of these people that do not care whatsoever about their health. All of a sudden, coronavirus hits and they're trying to tell people like him and I how to live. So anyway, yeah, so I got off on a bit of a tangent, but people like that, on Death to Tyrants, I probably would not have thought about getting someone like him on the show. So it's freed me up a bit to reach out to people that otherwise I may not have.
Yeah, I'll have to check out that show. I heard about the carnivore diet, of course, from Dr. Peterson.
Mm-hmm. This is the guy that helped Jordan Peterson and his daughter.
Okay, great.
Sean Baker.
Cool. I imagine in your line of work that nutrition and exercise and working out is an important part of your daily regimen, right?
Yes, daily, exactly.
It really it blew my mind. So I'm not much of a gym guy, but I love to swim. I was a swimmer in high school, and we got a pool like right across the street from my house here. And when coronavirus hit, the first thing they did is close the pool.
Yeah.
And I go there and they're like, well, you can put your account on furlough for a while and, come back in a couple of months and see if you can come back to the gym. I'm like, all right. So I go back and 3 months later, they say, yeah, the pool is open, but you're not allowed to use the locker room.
Oh, or do you have to get in it with those face shields too?
Well, I don't know. I didn't ask about the face shields, but you have to wear a mask when you're working out, which didn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah.
But my question is, here it is, it's wintertime in Illinois, and you're telling me that I can go into the pool. I can't go in the locker room, but I can jump in the water, and then I'm supposed to come out of the water and go back to my car in the freezing cold.
Yeah.
But I go in the locker room and change it. What kind of sense does that make?
Yeah, I suppose they think you could only get COVID in the locker room. Yeah, that's one of the frustrating things to people like you and me about the COVID rules and regulations is that there's no consistent logic and it's ridiculous. It's for theater. We know that. And yeah, of all times, there's a virus out there that's supposedly very damaging. I had it, so I can at least speak on it. And they want you to sit inside, not get vitamin D in the sun, and not exercise at a gym. Just sit inside and collect a paycheck that they vote on to give you. Bad timing, that's for sure. Didn't make any sense, but it sure made a lot of people happy, which was disappointing to see. So
I have a couple of friends I've known that actually got coronavirus, and like you said, they said it was like a flu. They were out for a couple of days, and I was like, okay, well, what else is new? And I kept telling, my wife was like, stop telling me every time somebody gets coronavirus. It's like before this year or last year, you never call me up and say, yeah, my best friend has the flu or my best friend has this cough. It's like, what the heck, but all of a sudden, because the media has made this such a newsworthy story, it's like everybody I know who had coronavirus or who might have gotten or who's been exposed to somebody, it's like, okay, tell me something else. There's got to be something else to talk about here.
Yeah, and the flu cases mysteriously just went to almost nothing, like historic lows. I don't know if you noticed that as well.
Yeah, well, that's the first thing that coronavirus did is cured the flu and it cured old age and everything else.
Apparently.
Cool. Yeah, so you mentioned earlier that you were really you were into Southern culture and history.
Yes.
That's interesting because, obviously being in Chicago, most of the history that I learned in school is Northern version of history.
But it is here too, unfortunately.
Well, I was fortunate because my brother, actually my mom and my brother moved to Florida when he was in high school. So this was like 25 years ago. And I've been exposed to Southern culture just from hearing from my brother for the last 25 years. I really find it fascinating, the different cultures all around the United States, the different history, different versions of history.
Yes, the prevailing history is the one typically written by the winners. unfortunately. But yeah, and to speak to your point about how many different cultures there are all over the place, like I live in a small town here in Texas, and I would imagine it's quite a bit different than Chicago, right? And it's funny that leftists want one governing body to rule everyone and make the same rules, homogenous thought, and all of that for everyone without realizing, look, people are different all over the place. We're not all the same. So quit trying to force a one size fits all system on everyone.
One of the guys I listened to, Brian McClanahan,
Yes.
he calls it Yankeeism. He's like,
Yes.
a lot of people use the term Karen, right?
Yeah.
Or people who try to force a lifestyle on everyone. He just calls it Yankees. I don't know if that term is used in Texas very much, but
It is. That's I like him a lot too. He's a very good voice. He's big in a Southern history.
Cool. All right. Well, going forward, Buck, I think that just having this world that we live in, where we have different voices, different ideas, different people delivering messages, is very important. And I guess that I wanted to talk to you a little bit, just because I like your show, and I think that you're doing the right thing out there. I think that really going out there and making a difference in people's lives, just because of the fact that they can hear different ideas, is really important.
Thanks, man. I'm trying. Keep it's certainly fun. It's certainly fun.
So what's next on the horizon for you? You mentioned that you might be retiring, you may not. You just keep rolling with the podcast. Got any big plans for the future, or what?
So, the ability to retire is there, but I'm having a lot of fun at work. So we'll see. Keep doing that for a while. But yeah, I mean, I have nothing but upward and forward momentum with the show. I certainly wanted to keep growing it, and I'm having fun doing it. I used to get stressed by it, and it's so fun. It's so fun now. It's kind of become a bit on a roll, so it helps. It's to this point where I have people writing me to come on. I write other, I reach out to people all the time as well, but there was a time when I first started where there's no way someone would write me to come on my show. So it's neat to get that feeling now. I just read a piece that Mark Claire put out about the stages of podcasting. And so I thought that was very well put. And he kind of went through those stages, and I thought, oh, that's I'm in that number 5 or wherever he said. So yeah, it's cool. I love it. And I'm going to keep doing it. Probably just keep doing one a week for now. My God, these guys like Tom Woods that put out 5 a week, and Pete Quinones and Dave Smith that put out 3 a week. I know Scott Horton puts out several. I do not know how those people do it. I mean, the stress, like I said, this 1 a week used to stress me. Now I love it, but it's a good stress. Putting out 5 a week, I cannot imagine doing that.
Well, they probably don't have a full-time job like you and I do.
That's true. Yeah, when I go to my job, I'm there for 24 hours. So that cuts several days of my week out. But yeah, just being able to think of so much content, amazing. Those guys are just incredible to do what they do. And yeah, so anyway, sorry to rant again and ramble.
No problem. With this podcast, I like to talk about all kinds of different things. And as we are both podcasters, and you brought it up, just the stages of podcasting, I'll have to check that out, because I feel like I'm in a second stage, kind of getting more comfortable with it. But even once in a while, you're like, okay, what the heck am I doing here?
Yeah, Mark Claire put it out. He tweeted about it. It's one of his Substack pieces that he wrote. It's a good read if you do this like you and I do.
Very cool. All right. Well, hey, Buck, any last thoughts you want to leave with everybody?
The thought I want to leave with everyone is check out the Counterflow podcast and follow me on Twitter at Buck Rebel, BuckRebel. Oh yeah, here's a thought. You joined it. We got this Telegram group now, and it's pretty damn fun, man. People are jumping in there. It's on the Telegram app. Counterflow with Buck Johnson is the room, and we're approaching 100 people in there right now. And people, it's neat to meet my listeners and the stuff that everyone shares in these articles and posts and YouTube videos, it's that's a white pill in its own. So you guys, if you're listening, join that.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I checked out your Telegram. I'm part of I don't know, probably 25 different groups. I can't keep up with them. But,
Oh my gosh! See, I'm in like 5. So I'm in a couple of groups with a bunch of Hans Hermann Hoppians,
there you go.
And then a Thaddeus Russell one, and then my own.
Well, I gotta constantly find people with different ideas out there to make the show interesting. So
Yeah.
Maybe I spread myself a little too thin there, but
Yeah, 25. My God, the notifications would be going crazy.
Well, I appreciate it, Buck. It's been a good conversation.